At the turn of the 20th century, Roseville was a small community of about 250 people. This all changed in 1906 with the relocation of the rail yards and their facilities from Rockland. With the rail yard also came railroad workers and their families. The existing township, unable to provide the services needed by its fast-growing population, organized a local chamber of commerce to act as a town council. One of the issues facing them was the almost complete absence of any organized fire protection. So in 1907, a fire protection committee was formed, and with it came the birth of the Roseville Fire Department. The Fire Protection Committee's first act of business was to select W.B. Musson as fire chief. It was up to him to recruit and train the volunteer firefighters.
In the early 1900s, if you became a member of the fire department, you were exempt from jury duty, military service, and items like that.
Fighting the fire in the early days was pretty rough. What they had to do was connect the hoses to the city water mains and fight the fire from that point, just with the hoses. They had, per se, no equipment.
They had these hose carts, about 6 of them they finally ended up with.
They'd grab a hold of the hose cart and start running towards the fire, wherever it may be.
Fire team pulled it like a team of horses. They pulled the cart.
Pulling several hundred feet of hose on a heavy cast frame. Some of those wheels were up to 6 feet tall, so you're probably looking at probably 600, 700 pounds of cart you're hauling.
With the formal incorporation of Roseville in 1909, a municipal volunteer fire department was organized, replacing the Citizens Volunteer Department. Gottlieb Hanisch was selected as the new fire chief, beginning 3 generations of exceptional fire service by the Hanisch family. His son Walter was also fire chief. Grandson David served with distinction for many years.
Dave Hanisch was a real fighter. He was a smoke eater. I mean, he was fearless to go in a building.
My dad and my grandfather, they did a lot for this city. My dad took care of the fire alarm system for the city. It didn't cost the city any money. He took care of it.
The early years were busy and challenging. The devastating Pacific Street Fire of August 1911 demonstrated the limitations of firefighting at that time.
But with 1.5 inches or whatever those hose carts, they probably, it might have been 1.5 inches wide. With the volume in that, you're not going to get much height.
With most of the buildings being wood, they burned everything down. So containment, stopping the fire from spreading, was a major priority. It was completely different compared to what we do now, where we have enough manpower and equipment that we can stop a fire most of the time and keep it from destroying the rest of a house or the rest of a building. Back then, if they were able to stop it at one house, that was great.
Pacific Street never recovered its place as one of Roseville's principal business centers. Only the Oddfellows building remains today. Lincoln Street was also hard hit by 2 fires in early 1924. However, the street continued to thrive with new brick buildings quickly replacing the burned wooden structures, including Firehouse No. 1, the city's first fire station.
Things really started to change when the city became motorized.
It took 3 years of debating what type of apparatus to purchase. They bought a 1917 Studebaker.
In the early 20s, the city purchased 2 more trucks.
They were American or France, both pumpers, had some short ladders on it, attic ladder, roof ladder.
You know, those old fire trucks are kind of like old girlfriends. You just love them. You really do. And when I was a little kid, I fell in love with that fire truck, and I drove it and I worked with it, and I was just so pleased with it. I loved that truck so much that I used to polish the brass couplings all the time just to make it look pretty.
The system to alert the volunteer firemen of a fire began as simply as you can imagine. Over time, the system evolved.
Now, when I was a little kid growing up here, they used to have the railroad would put out a code system.
The big steam whistle would blow out the numbers like 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. So they'd give 3 long blasts on the air whistle and whatever number the fire was at. So, how'd they find the fire? They stepped out and looked for the smoke.
Chief Walter Hanisch used his background working at the Roseville Telephone Company to develop and install a telephone system for residents to report fires.
The telephone company had operators, and when somebody called in and tell the operator they had a fire, she had a box she pulled, and that rang a bell down the firehouse, both firehouses. She pulled another box, which rang a bell down the powerhouse of the Southern Pacific Company, and he would blow a big steam whistle, notifying the volunteers of the fire.
He would call into the operator and give your name, Fireman Wolf, where's the fire? And they would tell you. And it happened that these 2 ladies that were the operators knew me personally, and they would always warn me to be careful going to a fire. But it was comforting, to have them concerned.
In the 1950s, the old SP whistle was replaced by an air horn on top of City Hall. With it came a new code system.
Before we had the dispatch system, we would take the calls ourselves. The phone would ring, it was a big clamper noise, and we would answer the call, and we'd get where it was, and we would locate it and just go look on the map and take off and go from here. And the second man out who was going to drive the truck, he set up what we call the alarm board, so the horn would blow and the volunteers would know.
Back in those days, when we got notified of a call, the operators would ring us on a ring down line. And so they just pushed the button down, and you could tell sometimes by the way the operator pushed the ring down button, whether it was something that was neek, 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 you're gonna go somewhere. But man, when she went, and it just stayed down, rang and rang and rang until you picked it up, you knew she was panicking.
Every corner in the city had a code assigned to it. Just like the code in my corner where I lived was 2144. And if there was a fire, they would blow a whistle on top of City Hall in that code. While Dad was getting dressed, it was our job to listen to the code and look up in the code book to see where he can tell him where he's going to go to the fire.
When that alarm rang, everything changed. Everything became very, very serious. But there was many times I could be in that pumper going and be 4 and 5 blocks away and see something glowing in the air. Boy, you just hope the heck nobody's in there. And
It's very nerve-wracking. I'll tell you, if I didn't have something to do at night, I'd hang around the firehouse waiting for the bell. This is something that doesn't sound very nice because it's going to be a tragedy when a fire happens. But if you're a true-blooded fireman, you're kind of anxious for the bell to hit. And when that bell hits, the adrenaline pumps into your system. You've got to do something. You're either going to fight or run. And that adrenaline doesn't stop until they start rolling hoses at the end of the fire.
From the beginning of the department up to the 1980s, volunteers were depended upon for fire protection. Oftentimes, they had very little protective equipment.
What a glorious group those guys were. That would come out of their homes in the middle of the night and miss their jobs in the morning, come help us fight fire.
We never were able to get any extra equipment, turnout coats or helmets. If you got one of those, you had to be first to the fire because there was usually 3 or 4 of them on a truck, maybe a turnout coat. So consequently, a lot of volunteers ruined shoes and clothes.
There wasn't even enough for the guys that were on the truck. More or less all the volunteers that came that we couldn't have operated without.
We'd be wearing a pair of regular pants, and we just throw our turnout coat over the top of us and our helmet on top, which was just a little plastic thing today. I'd call it a toy compared to the ones they wear now.
In those days when you go in a building, you'd know if it was getting too hot, if your ears start to burn. That was your signal to back out. You didn't see a lot of firefighters wearing breathing apparatus. It was kind of a badge of honor to see how much smoke you could breathe without coughing. Nowadays we say don't breathe smoke because it's bad for you.
Like the Hanisch family, the Sharp family also has a long and distinguished history in the department. Fire Station 6 is named for Ray Sharp, one of the legends of the Roseville Fire Department.
Started, in the 30s as a volunteer fireman. I believe in 1938 he became a full-time firefighter. Left to do some time during the war, came back, resumed his career, eventually promoted all the way up to the assistant chief. In 1968 he passed away due to a heart attack while fighting a fire out in the corner of Booth and Atkinson.
I'm probably one of the few people that are left that actually work shift work with Ray Sharp. And my gosh, what an honor. That man was a blessing to me. He helped me through a lot of stuff that I really, really didn't understand, and he really took me by the hand and led me around.
He was a firefighter's firefighter. He was a go-getter. He didn't lay back at all. He went after it. As a child, he was your idol. Your dad, the firefighter. And I just patterned myself after him. I used to go to calls whenever I could with him. And growing up, became part of the family because my mother, my sister, my grandmother was involved in the fire department. And it was a family affair. And so I would become involved and obviously wanted to grow up to be a firefighter like my dad.
In 1947, Pete Badavinick was named fire chief. As was the standard of the day, he wore more than one hat, doubling as the city's building inspector.
Well, we were very fortunate. I think when Fire Chief Badavinick came in, he had some innovative ideas, not discrediting anybody prior to his time, but he could see that we had to do some improvements.
If the city wanted something, they went to government surplus, bought an old chassis, got some surplus steel from the Southern Pacific, who were very kind to us, and he'd take the advantage of the talents of many of the people that were working for him, and we'd build it in the shop. We'd fabricate it, put it together, build it, then we'd run it as a fire truck. But what the heck, it did the job.
In the early days, when we would respond to the calls, we'd be by ourselves. I mean, when you opened the doors and you took off out of this station with a truck or an engine, you was by yourself. I mean, you pulled up to a fire, a lot of times you was it. You was the captain, you was the engineer, and you was the fireman.
Most of the time there were one or two volunteers waiting for you when you got there, and they'd come and help you hook up to a hydrant if you needed to, and then pull a line and go in and get it.
It's like crawling into a black closet. You can't see anything, you can't hear anything, it's muffled. You're just feeling around by your hands and you feel something all of a sudden and you go, okay, what is that? You go like that until you can figure out what it is, and if it's somebody, then you grab them and drag them out. But it's working in the blind. It's like walking into a black closet.
Firefighting is a profession with unique challenges. Those who serve, no matter in which era, develop a special bond with their fellow firefighters.
Well, you spend more time with the guys on your shift at the fire station than you do with your wife at home.
You got to know the people you worked with. Like when I was downtown here, there were 4 of us. And you knew those people. You knew what they liked, what they didn't like, when they were having troubles at home, because they got discussed about. They got discussed at the table.
We are in unique situations where we've had times where we've gone down to Southern California for a week on an engine company, and you sleep on top of the fire engine, and you just are in amazing situations with mansions that are on fire and just unique fire behavior. And that you just build a bond, and the big thing is just because we work as a team. No firefighter that works, any firefighter that works alone is usually one that jeopardizes the team.
You had to be close, and you had to know everybody else and know how they reacted and would respond when they were under pressure, because your life depended on them and theirs depended on you.
With the hiring of Chief Carl Green in 1969, the framework for today's modern fire department began to be put in place.
Carl Green started to make it a professional firefighting unit then. Things really started to change, and Carl Green did one fine job on improving and getting all new equipment for us.
Absolute fantastic politician. He knew how to work the politics of the game. He would get things that probably other chiefs couldn't get because Carl played. He had coffee every day with the political leaders of the city, and then in the afternoon he'd have coffee with the staff and let everybody know what was going on.
For over 50 years, Roseville firefighters responded from only 2 small fire stations. That changed in 1961 with the opening of a new fire station on Kirby Way and the move of Station 1 from its home in Old City Hall to a new location on Oak Street in 1973. The city was growing steadily but slowly. That pace would not continue. The fire department would be challenged to keep up.
I definitely do remember the first day I came on the job here, and this department was about 10 years behind the times in terms of what the Bay Area was doing at the time, equipment-wise, policies and procedures, things that we did, additional services that we provided.
The fire department, when I arrived, was a good fire department, but it was a small fire department. It was a department that was responding to a lot of vital land fires, the grass fires, and it really was not quite geared up yet for the growth that was coming. Had good people, so our challenge was just to get together and get the fire department in step with the rest of the city, which was all planning and gearing all the way from the city manager and the city council down through the various departments.
You know, in 5 years, you just wondered, man, what high-speed train did we get on? Because we surpassed everybody. The innovation, the progressiveness was just incredible here.
Any fire chief likes to think that they did something, and for me that was kind of empowering, team building, opening up. An awful lot of fire departments were management in those days by the top. There was already some transition here under Carl Green for less of that. And that was the big thing. When I left here, I felt like this was a fire department that could take care of itself.
Decision making and where we needed to go was pushed down to the lowest level. So you had everybody in the organization was involved in the things that they thought were important that needed us to go and move forward.
There was one thing that I was always really proud of, and that was Jim Bush and I were tasked by the city manager to find a way for us to reduce the load on his budget, because when we bought a fire engine, it was costing us anywhere between $300,000 and $1 million. We don't expect the people that are already here and that are already receiving service to have to pay extra for us to fund the new engines that are being required for us by the new people that are coming in. All the new construction is what's going to have to fund the new equipment. We said, let the new folks pay. And it was, basically thought it was the fire facilities tax to fund fire trucks and buildings.
There are so many smart decisions that were made by my predecessors and other key managers in the city and the councils and the city managers that have really established Roseville and the fire department to be the kind of organization that we are today.
As the department grew, it also modernized, emphasizing fire prevention, training, emergency medical services, and other specialized services.
I can't emphasize enough how important it is for fire prevention. If you don't have a fire, then there's no fire to put out and people don't lose their homes. I remember one time there was a fire and there were 2 children and they picked them up from school, and when they came home and their house was gone, I'll never forget the look on their faces. And they were crying. They had lost everything. And you can replace material things, but it's so devastating to have a fire. The smell, the smoke, just the residue, it's dirty, it's sooty. It is a horrible experience for anyone to go through a fire. And if you can prevent them, that's where it is. And that was my goal, and it still is, to prevent fires.
It's the training that you get through that makes it almost, I wouldn't say automatic, but it removes a lot of the subconscious thinking that you do, you don't have time to think about that stuff. You have a job to do, you follow what you've been trained to do, you do it almost robotically to a certain point. And then I think after it's all said and done, if you stuck your neck out too far or you did something that was a little out of the ordinary, then, that's usually when you reflect and you go, geez Louise, what was I thinking?
It's like riding a bike. We all know how to ride a bike. We've all been, taught how to ride a bike. But how well can you ride that bike? We try to average about 200 hours of training a year per person. I like to call it the back to basics of how we throw ladders, how we pull hose, all the way up to advanced training on response to hazardous materials incidences, incident command system, how to command incidences. It's the whole gamut of everything that the fire service does. We lay hose, everything.
We had an evolution in the fire service, and EMS makes up about 75% of our calls, EMS standing for Emergency Medical Services. So when we were able to capitalize on taking over that service and assisting the private ambulance company and providing a real quick response and actually getting out there and saving lives, it was revolutionary. The fire problem is changing. It's getting actually more dangerous to be a firefighter because of the new technology, the new materials that are burning, houses are sealed tighter, so there's just a greater risk to go in and do interior firefighting, more so than ever.
One thing that hasn't changed is the importance placed on customer service.
Usually when we provide a service to somebody, it's in an emergent situation, and it could be the most tragic situation in their life. So if we can have them feeling that we've met their needs and assist them through that tragic time, then that's what we're here for, then we've done well.
I'm really, I think, most proud of the fact that we do so many non-traditional things that most fire departments aren't out there doing, like the Type 1 Hazmat Response Team is so important, and the fact that we've put programs in place currently and in the past that have been so important for the community. So I think it'll be important for me to look at it from the standpoint that my legacy is that we're continuing to prepare for the future.
The people of Roseville can be so proud of their fire department. They really can. This is, the top grade fire department in the state of California as far as I'm concerned.
The guys that I worked with and the guys that were before me sure handed off a pretty nice place to work to all the kids that are coming in today. And hopefully those kids, when they get ready to leave, hand it off an even better place.
I look back and I think, wow, I've had some great opportunity to learn. So I think my goal now is to share this knowledge with all the new people that are coming in. We have less fires every year, it seems like, because of our sprinklers and our prevention. But the goal is that we need to get our knowledge that we learned over these years into all these new people so that we can keep them safe.
Oh, it's very rewarding. It's a very rewarding career, very rewarding life.
I'm glad that I chose this profession. It gave me a lot of self-satisfaction.
It was really great with the fire department, and I couldn't choose another career. I was just as pleased, and even today when I see those guys, I walk up and I shake their hand, and they all come up to me and they pat me on the back and they shake my hand and say, "Hey buddy, how you doing?" "Oh, I'm doing fine."
This city was just one of those cities that it was nice at the level working with the council, the city manager, the department heads, the fire department, and we always had problems, but there were problems that we worked on together as a team, and I just enjoyed it. Wished I'd got here earlier and could have stayed later.
I wouldn't change a minute of the time that I've had since I've been here. It's been a great place.
There's few jobs where you can really go out and the people are, for the most part, happy to see you. They appreciate the service you provide, and the challenges that you face really move towards the greater good of the community. And that's really important. It's very rewarding.
I had to do it all over again. I'd do it all over again. I've been retired for 15 years, and I still have a fire radio sitting beside my chair so that I know when they go out, where they go, and what they do.
I love fire department. I love it. I just, it's something about it, it never goes away. It's there.